Thank you very much. Dr. Hendricks, thanks for those kind words and the great work that you do at the Stanley Mann Children's Research Institute at Northwestern. And I also want to acknowledge Dr. Margaret Foti, CEO of the American Association for Cancer Research, and Dr. Mary Woolley, who was just at the podium a few moments ago. You've met a number of my colleagues. They were all smart, good-looking, not as good-looking as Miss USA. Glad you're here. Olivia Jordan, glad that you've joined us. We're all excited, you know, because next week, Pope Francis is coming. But I'm excited this week because Dr. Francis is here. Here's an incredible statistic that happens to have Francis Collins' fingerprints on it. Think about it. It is 1 million times cheaper today to sequence DNA than it was 15 years ago. 1 million times cheaper. 15 years ago, it took 2 small armies of scientists working under Francis Collins and Craig Venter to sequence the human genome for the first time, to crack the code of life, as Dr. Collins says. Today, the Human Genome Project that Dr. Collins helped head has revolutionized the way we look at medicine all around the world. It has produced new insight, new hope, new therapy, in some cases, new cures. And none of that would have happened if the American people and the American government hadn't invested in the future and invested in the National Institutes of Health. This room that you're in is an interesting one. For some of you, you've been here before. But if this is your first time here, I've often said that if you couldn't be a mouse on the wall in the Senate chamber and Capitol, and you wanted to follow the course of history in America, you'd pick this room. Pick this room to watch this amazing array of history. It's over there in the corner. There's a posted notice of all of the things that have happened in this room. This room, there was the Senate hearing on the sinking of the Titanic. This was before Leonardo DiCaprio was even thought of. The Army McCarthy hearings, the Clarence Thomas hearings, the Senate Watergate hearings. It was in this room that John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy both announced their candidacy for President of the United States of America. Just around the corner from this room was the office of my great friend and former colleague, Teddy Kennedy. After he died, we made a decision in the Senate to rename this room the Kennedy Room to honor the fact that this had played such an important role in each of their lives. Teddy Kennedy, amazing, incredible contribution he made to America. I'll never forget the day we learned about his brain cancer, stage 4, glioblastoma multiforme. It was May 2008. There wasn't a dry eye in the Senate because we knew what the diagnosis meant. It was a death sentence. Teddy came back to the Senate only one time to cast a critical vote for health care, wouldn't you know it. 15 months after that diagnosis, Teddy was gone. 7 years ago. Today, researchers at Northwestern University, where Dr. Hendricks works, have demonstrated a way to potentially treat the brain cancer that killed Ted Kennedy and claims the lives, incidentally, of 10,000 Americans each year. We are just about this close to finding a cure to one of the most lethal, fastest growing cancers. And we can't stop. We've invested too much. There are too many lives at stake. There are too many cures within reach. Too many good jobs we can create right here in America. We can't abandon America's commitment to lead the world in medical research. Teddy Kennedy wasn't alone in believing in the promise of medical research. Here's what someone else said, and I'm going to quote him because if you happen to turn on your television a little later tonight, you're going to hear his name mentioned about every 30 seconds. The quote is this: "The remarkable thing is that although basic research doesn't begin with a particular practical goal, when you look at the results over the years, it ends up being one of the most practical things government does. This is why I urge Congress to devote more money to research. It's an indispensable investment in America's future." Of course, that was said by President Ronald Reagan. And I'm hoping that some of those on the podium tonight will acknowledge this wisdom on the part of President Reagan as they pay homage to him. Research, indispensable investment in America. I'm happy to report we are working hard to create a bipartisan caucus to push for research. My friend from South Carolina, who was in the earlier debate, Lindsey Graham, he and I have come together to form the NIH caucus in the Senate, 27 members, including Jerry Moran and Amy Klobuchar that you met just shortly. Here's our challenge. There are a bunch of members of Congress who say we're all for increasing federal investment in medical research, but you have to take the money from other places. Take it out of school lunches. Take it out of federal subsidies to help families pay for health insurance. Take it out of student loan guarantees. Well, I say there's a better solution. Lift the budget cap so America remains the world's leader in biomedical research. I hope you agree with me that that is the best way to deal with research and our budget. The doctors who are here can tell you the cost of not doing research, the sobering statistic that one America is diagnosed every 67 seconds with Alzheimer's, the fact that we spent over $226 billion last year on Alzheimer's care, and that doesn't even consider the compensation of family members and loved ones who did everything they could every minute of the day to help those afflicted. If we stay on the same path and do nothing about Alzheimer's, the cost will increase 500% by the year 2050. It will literally eat the budget. The hopeful news, a medical breakthrough that could delay the onset of Alzheimer's by only 5 years, could cut those annual costs by 40% and save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars a year. I'm willing to bet on research. I'm willing to bet on the men and women who are searching for those cures. I'm willing to bet that before 2050, they'll find a way to not only slow down and, God willing, stop the scourge, but save us countless billions of dollars in the process. Are you willing to make that bet with me? I hope you are. So it was 2 or 3 years ago, I went up to see Dr. Collins at NIH, and I said to him, I can remember the day, and you can too, when 3 people came together, Congressman John Porter, Senator Arlen Specter, and Senator Tom Harkin, and said, we're going to double the budget for the National Institutes of Health. People said, you're crazy, you'll never get it done, but they did it. And I said to Dr. Collins, I don't think I can promise you that, but what can I do that makes a difference? And he said, give me 5% real growth in NIH for 10 years. That way, we can get researchers who believe they have a future in research. We can get people to invest in research projects that will take some time, and we can have some certainty that we're going to be here. And we will save more money with that investment than what the taxpayers ever spend. So I took it to heart, and as Dr. Hendricks mentioned earlier, and introduced the American Cures Act. As I said to Dr. Collins, when I first came to Congress and the House, I used to say, wait a minute, somebody stole my idea. Now I welcome people to steal my ideas, particularly if it means more money for medical research. Now those of you who are going out to tell the story, that's what you need to do. Ever hear the name Jack Valenti? Jack Valenti worked for LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Then he was head of the Motion Picture Association, a real dynamo. And he said there are 6 words to include in every speech. Let me tell you a story. That's what you need to do. I know from some of the buttons that are being worn here, you have stories to tell of people that you love, people that meant a great deal to you in your lives. And each of us have those stories to tell. Tell those stories if you can find that congressman or senator. If you can't, tell it to the staffer. Don't give up. Sometimes they're a lot smarter than the senators. Wouldn't you agree, Molly? Sure she would. And tell the stories that make the difference. And I promise you this, if those senators and congressmen and the staff people are listening, they're going to realize something very basic. Despite the partisanship in this town, despite the divisions in this town, I've often made a bet with my colleagues, invite me to your state, invite me to your district, and I promise you that when I get on the topic of medical research, everybody in that room is going to forget their party label. We're all in this life together, and we all want to reach that point where when someone we love gets a heartbreaking diagnosis, and you turn to the doctor and say, is there a medicine? Is there a surgery? Is there a cure? And he smiles and says, yes, there's been a breakthrough. That's what we're all waiting for. I grew up in an era when kids were more frightened by polio than they were by nuclear weapons. and we didn't know where it came from. Every mom had a theory. What's making that kid sick? My mom thought it was the water that stood in the streets after a rainstorm. Stay out of that water, you'll get polio, she told me. She was making it up, but she was doing her best. But every one of us at every school knew a kid diagnosed with polio, ending up in an iron lung. Incredible, isn't it? To think that was life in America. And then they came up and gave us kind of a mixed message. Good news, we found a vaccine that will prevent polio. The bad part, it's in a shot. Oh, okay. But thank goodness, Dr. Salk, Dr. Sabin did that. That research changed the world. We're this close to eradicating polio in the world. Rotary International and others have done such an extraordinary job. But it brought hope, and it saved lives, and it brought a quality of life to America. That's what research can do, and that's a story I hope you'll repeat. Thank you.